For 7 years my sister treated me like a ghost. The day I vanished from our hometown, she looked me in the eye and screamed that I had abandoned the family for a selfish, hollow life. I didn't defend myself. I couldn't tell her about the classified oaths, the silent deployments, or the uniform hidden beneath civilian clothes. She spent nearly a decade building a perfect suburban life with her husband, Mark, believing I was nothing more than a coward who ran away. Then yesterday 2 black SUVs pulled into my driveway. A high-ranking general walked up to my door holding a classified dossier and a piece of burnt wreckage from an overseas black site. Mark was missing behind enemy lines, and buried inside his personal locker was a handwritten journal bearing my retired Special Operations call sign. Command didn't send an extraction team. They came to reactivate me. My name is Captain Elena Vance. I am 34 years old, and as far as my family is concerned, I manage regional warehouse logistics for a mid-tier freight company. They believe I live a dull, predictable life, punching a time card in an office 3 states away. It is the exact lie I spent 7 years building brick by brick, because the truth, that I was a deep-cover operative running black-budget reconnaissance, would have put a target on their backs. 7 years ago my younger sister Clara stood on our mother's front porch in tears and called me a coward. Our mother was sick, bills were mounting, and I had just received sudden deployment orders to an off-the-books sector. I couldn't explain why I had to pack a duffel bag and disappear overnight. I couldn't tell her about the classified oaths that legally bound my tongue under threat of federal treason. When Clara screamed that I was a selfish traitor who abandoned the family when they needed me most, I just stood there, absorbed every ounce of her venom, and walked away into the rain without a word. Since then Clara married Mark, had a child, and cut me completely out of her world. I became the family outcast, the deadbeat sister who didn't care. I quietly paid off our mother's medical debts through anonymous trusts, watched Clara's life unfold through filtered social media posts from burner accounts, and kept my head down in a quiet suburban rental. I thought the silence was the price I had to pay to keep them safe. Then yesterday at 0600 hours, 2 unmarked black SUVs pulled into my gravel driveway. I didn't reach for my phone. My hand instantly dropped to the suppressed sidearm strapped beneath my kitchen counter. The man who stepped out wasn't a local officer. It was General Hayes, Director of Special Operations Command, dressed in full-service alpha greens. He didn't knock. He walked straight through my front door, tossed a classified red-striped dossier onto my dining table, and looked at me with cold, bloodshot eyes. "Suit up, Captain," Hayes said, his voice flat. "Your brother-in-law just vanished behind enemy lines." General Hayes didn't wait for an invitation to sit. He dropped a manila envelope on top of the red-striped folder, sliding 3 satellite reconnaissance photos across the timber tabletop. "Mark isn't an IT consultant for overseas logistics," Hayes began, leaning forward with his hands braced against the wood. "He never was. For the last 4 years, your brother-in-law has been running private signals intelligence for high-threat theater networks under Joint Special Command. 72 hours ago his team hit a coordinated ambush outside Aleppo. His entire detail was wiped out, but the recovery team found no trace of Mark's body. Just drag marks, spent brass, and an empty staging cache. My heart pounded a hollow rhythm against my ribs. All those family holidays Clara spent boasting about Mark's stable corporate paycheck, mocking my supposed aimless warehouse jobs, had been a smoke screen. Mark had been living the exact same double life I had. "Why are you here, General?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Extraction isn't my jurisdiction anymore. I was discharged 3 years ago. Because of what our sweep team pulled out of his private quarters at the forward operating base," Hayes answered, tapping the classified file. He slid over a high-resolution photograph of a standard-issue footlocker. Inside, tucked beneath encrypted hard drives and field maps, was a weather-beaten green operations ledger. In thick black marker across the title page was a single tactical call sign, Spectre 6. My blood turned to pure ice. Spectre 6 was my call sign. It had been scrubbed from federal servers the day I left active duty, classified under Level 7 compartmentalization. No low-level operative should have ever possessed that name. "Mark wasn't just working the sector," Hayes said, locking eyes with me. "He was digging into classified legacy networks. He was searching for you before his transponder went dark. We don't have time for bureaucratic clearance channels, Captain. You have 72 hours before the Pentagon officially marks him killed in action. Reactivate your clearance, track your brother-in-law down and bring him home. Before catching the military transport at dawn, I had to stop at Clara's house. I needed to see what Mark had left behind on domestic soil, but more than that, I had to look my sister in the eye. When Clara opened the front door, she looked shattered. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen from sleepless nights. The Department of Defense had already paid her a visit, giving her the standard sanitized narrative that her husband was missing after a civilian contract transport went off the radar. The moment she recognized my face standing on her porch, her grief instantly morphed into raw, burning fury. "What are you doing here, Elena?" she snapped, blocking the doorway with her trembling frame. "Did you come to see the mess you ran away from? Mark is out there somewhere, possibly dead, and you just show up playing the concerned sister after 7 years of utter silence." "Clara, let me inside," I said gently, keeping my tone level. "I'm here to help." "Help with what?" "An inventory count from your little warehouse." She spat, the bitterness dripping from every word. "You abandoned Mom when she was dying, you abandoned me, and now you want to stand in my house pretending you give a damn about my family? Get out." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I gently sidestepped her and walked straight down the hallway toward Mark's private study. Clara followed behind me, shouting insults, but my focus had shifted entirely into tactical analysis. The room looked like an ordinary home office, but my trained eyes spotted the discrepancies instantly. Beneath a stack of innocent corporate utility receipts on his desk sat a faint indentation on the leather blotter. I slid open the lower baseboard behind his bookshelf, a classic dead-drop compartment. Inside was an encrypted dual-band transponder and a regional map stamped with red grid coordinates matching the classified coordinates General Hayes had shown me that morning. Mark hadn't just been ambushed. He had deliberately staged a contingency route. Clara stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks, yelling that I had no right to touch his things. I closed the drawer, turned around and looked at her. "I'm going to bring him home, Clara," I whispered. She scoffed, crossing her arms in sheer disgust. "You couldn't even stay around to save your own family, Elena. How are you going to save him?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, turned on my heel and walked out into the night to catch my flight. The tactical C-130 touched down on a blacked-out airstrip near the northern border at 0200 hours. The air was dry, smelling of burnt jet fuel and desert dust. Within 20 minutes, I had traded my civilian jacket for sanitized tactical gear, suppressed carbine and encrypted comms. General Hayes had provided a specialized 3-man shadow detail, but the breach route belonged entirely to me. Using the grid coordinates Mark had hidden in his desk, we tracked a faint low-frequency beacon to an abandoned concrete grain silo 6 clicks outside a hostile border village. Thermal imaging showed 3 perimeter sentries and 2 heat signatures underground. The rogue contractor cell holding him thought they were entirely off the grid. They didn't know Spectre 6 was clearing their perimeter. We breached in total silence. Flashbangs tore through the darkness, followed by rapid, disciplined suppression. Within 90 seconds, the compound was secured. I kicked open the reinforced steel basement door. In the corner, tied to a rusted iron pipe, sat Mark. His face was bruised, uniform torn and caked in dried blood, but his eyes were sharp. When he looked up through the tactical flashlight beams and saw me standing in full operational command, his jaw dropped. "Captain Vance," he croaked, coughing through parched lips. "Elena." I cut the heavy zip ties binding his wrists, handed him a hydration pack and pulled him to his feet. "Take it easy, Mark. We're getting you out." "You came," he whispered, clutching my arm with trembling fingers. "I found a corrupted procurement pipeline. Millions in diverted military hardware sold to rogue militias. When I traced the backdoor accounts, the higher-ups tried to silence my team. I found your old files in the classified archives. You were the only operative who ever survived uncovering that specific cell. I knew if I left your call sign in my staging locker, Command would have no choice but to bring in the only person alive who could break this grid. We'll debrief on the bird," I said, handing him his recovered credentials. "Right now, you have a wife waiting at home." 48 hours later, the 4th-floor corridor of Walter Reed Military Medical Center was dead silent except for the rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights. Clara was sitting on a hard waiting room chair, clutching a cold paper cup of coffee, still believing an unnamed elite rescue squad had miraculously extracted her husband from a foreign combat zone. When the elevator doors at the end of the hallway chimed, Clara looked up. Walking down the hall was General Hayes, accompanied by 2 high-ranking brass officers in pristine service dress. But walking beside them wasn't an ordinary civilian sister. I wore the full dress uniform of a decorated United States Army captain, the gold insignia and 3 rows of classified service ribbons gleaming across my chest under the hospital lights. Claire froze. The paper cup slipped from her hands, coffee splashing across the linoleum tile. She stood up, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound as she stared at the silver rank on my shoulders. Before Clara could utter a word, General Hayes came to a crisp halt, faced me and snapped a sharp formal hand salute. The other officers followed instantly. "Captain Vance," General Hayes announced in a commanding voice that echoed down the entire ward. "On behalf of Special Operations Command, your operational execution has been entered into the distinguished record. Your brother-in-law is safe because of your courage." "Dismissed, Captain." I returned the salute with steady discipline. "Thank you, General." The officers stepped away, leaving Clara standing alone, trembling from head to toe. Tears welled in her eyes as the horrifying truth finally shattered 7 years of blind resentment. The sister she called a deadbeat, the woman she accused of abandoning their family, was a decorated Black Ops commander who had just crossed an ocean to bring her husband back from the dead. Just then the hospital room door opened. Mark sat up in his bed with his arm in a sling, looking at Clara with absolute clarity. "Clara," Mark said softly, his voice cracking with emotion. "Elena didn't abandon anyone. She's the only reason I'm still breathing." Clara dropped to her knees right there in the hallway, burying her face in her hands as deep, agonizing sobs tore from her chest. "Elena. God, Elena, what did I say to you? How could you ever forgive me?" I walked over, knelt on the tile floor and pulled my little sister into a tight embrace. The 7 years of silence, the pain, the cold lies, it all washed away in that quiet corridor. "It's okay, Clara," I whispered, holding her steady. "I'm home now,